Okay, a little more American Standard rants for everybody. Here we go. Picking right up where we left off. All too often in the business world, this despicable act is a necessary prerequisite to making a living, that is, selling your soul. Turn your back on all your suffering brothers and sisters struggling to live decent lives and treat each other with care, decency, dignity, and respect. Just sell them all down the river and look out for number one. It's all good. Except when you can see through the surface gloss of all the money and notoriety and look down into your inner core, you see that it's completely hollow. The center does not, cannot, will not hold. The people of substance who do the actual work of keeping the society functioning, who live their lives by the unspoken principle that you don't have to fuck people over to survive, are all too often on the bottom ring of the ladder economically. They are those who are gifted and cursed with integrity, who refuse to demean themselves by swallowing the big lie and going along to get along. They refuse to go along with the big con just to get ahead. They know it just isn't worth it. I can feel it in my gut, too. Whatever you're willing to pay me, it's just not enough to live with that big a lie strapped across my back to make my way through this life with. Every step of the way weighing me down with the accumulated knowledge of the years of shameful compromise and dirty deals, making my every plodding step a massive effort just to continue to uphold the sad charade of civilization. When I know in my heart there's nothing in the least bit civilized about the dog-eat-dog business world, where in order to make it, you must first learn to smile while you kill. That's what it means to have a, quote, good job. You have a position within our system where we can make use of your physical and intellectual labors. Any efforts at change wasted breath. If you're working against us, attempting to subvert our control, or otherwise attempting to overthrow us or identify us, you'll be out of a job. Thus, the corporate structure of modern American society swallows up any would-be rebels and makes them into mere entertainment, eliminating any possible dissent. The only ones allowed to keep their position and thrive monetarily and have a career within the system are those willing to check their humanity and ideals at the door. The process of weeding out begins in earnest when they ask you the first probing questions at the initial job interview. Are you willing to let us make use of you? Any objections to our brutal system of enforced order? Any compunctions to playing our deadly game with human lives, throwing them away once they're no longer useful to us? If so, you don't really belong here. Better to find some other less demanding job where you can eke out a meager living but be able to maintain some shrinking portion of your fading human decency. In order to succeed in the high-pressure career world as a corporate flunky, one must be willing to turn on anyone and throw them to the wolves without a moment's hesitation. If you don't believe, as they do, that everyone is replaceable and have no problem throwing someone else's life into the trash can, then you're just no good to them. It has to be that way. Otherwise, how can the system continue to function? If we are unwilling to obey the cruel dictates of an inhuman order that places profits over people, then the jig is up. The game is over. When we refuse to behave as expected, the revolution will have at least been won. When we value people's lives over the bottom line, we can all heave a collective sigh and at last be able to sleep soundly in our beds at night with a clear conscience, knowing we haven't wronged anyone horribly just to maintain our tenuous position in the company hierarchy. Until that day, the horror of the air-conditioned nightmare will continue unabated. The sterile office, prison/insane asylum paradigm will continue to eat into the souls of once decent people, turning them into unfeeling machines, mere cogs and tools in the grinding monster of the annihilation industry, gobbling up the planet in its oil-guzzling furnace, belching smoke from its fuming belly, shitting out useless chunks of plastic, yet more mirrors for a nation of narcissists, amassing more wealth by playing to the vanity of our worst impulses, encouraging us to care more about our appearance than the terrible concrete results of our actions. When we go along with what we know in our hearts is wrong for our own convenience, just to make our own lives easier, Even the best intentioned delusions have a purpose. They exist to justify the wrongs while punishing those unfortunates who pay the terrible price of keeping our bloated appetites aloft. We will end up in the same boat once the American standard of living is totally abolished in the endless pursuit of profit over people. When that day comes, we will all get what we no doubt deserve, an ignominious end. That's pretty cheerful stuff, huh? Okay. All right. Shoot first, ask questions never. Shoot first, ask questions never. Okay, here we go. To anyone considering the U.S. military as a career choice or preparing to submit to the oncoming draft, a few brief words of caution are in order. The thing to remember is, our troops are not in a foreign land debating the proper course of action to take after having considered all the possible consequences and then deciding for themselves what would be the best way to minimize the human casualties of their continued occupation. In short, they are paid to kill. As a soldier of imperial conquest, if you're lucky enough to survive your misadventures, you had to kill someone else, perhaps many others, and will now have to live with that on your conscience for the rest of your life. The other scenario has you coming home lifeless in a flag-draped blind coffin, or blind, deaf, or missing a limb or two. You'd be better off dressed in rags and wandering the streets directionless than wearing a nice new uniform, standing in line with the Legion of Doom, headed off to kill in the name of freedom, with the hollow blessings of our leader. To understand the cause of this thirst for death, we have to realize that the military in this country is really all about providing job training and money for college? Not exactly. American soldiers are essentially trained to be unthinking killing machines, flesh and blood tools used to achieve economic or political goals for whoever holds the reins of U.S. power at the moment. To be effective in this role, they must be willing to take lives without hesitation upon the orders of their commanding officer. This indoctrination into the ways of mass murder is called basic training. A prolonged brainwashing process of humiliation designed to break down one's individual point of view and destroy any empathy for the opposing side in a conflict. Too much sympathy towards the victims of one's potential aggression may not be good for business as well as for the soldiers. That's why unthinking obedience, denial of individual choice, and the willingness to, quote, just follow orders are precisely those qualities most admired in a, quote, good soldier. The twisted logic of the military mindset has it that although the soldier gives up his ability to distinguish between right and wrong when he joins the service, he leaves his commanding officer to shoulder that burden, trusting his decisions will be right and just. Such misplaced blind trust has led us to the long buried history of U.S. atrocities all over the globe. Napalming villages, poisoning crops, and raining death upon unarmed civilians who have been labeled the enemy by the U.S. government. This state-sponsored terrorism will continue unabated as long as people refuse to consider the consequences of their actions in the name of obeying unjust authority. Whenever a soldier shrugs his shoulders and says to himself, "They don't pay me to think," he must realize he has consented to engage in criminal and immoral acts. It's a terrible irony that anyone willing to part with his conscience in the name of freedom has thrown away the very thing that makes him free in the first place. Those concerned with justice need to destroy this widely held myth of U.S. soldiers fighting to, quote, protect our freedom, quote, anyway. What they're fighting to protect is the freedom of the corporations who dictate U.S. foreign policy. The banks and corporations who dictate U.S. foreign policy control the world.